She stumbled past the gate like a forgotten ghost. Her legs buckled, arms limp, breath shallow. Just outside one of the wealthiest homes in the country, she collapsed, face first, into stone. Her body didn't move, not once, not even when the front lights flickered on. The mansion behind her had hosted prime ministers, movie stars, and power brokers, but that night, it would bear witness to something far more human. Inside, a man stood watching. His name was Alejandro Varick. He had influence, empires, and a silence that lived with him like a second skin. He could have turned away. People like him usually did. But he didn't. Moments later, he opened the gate himself. In tailored slacks and bare feet, he stepped into the cold and walked straight toward the lifeless figure on the ground. Not a bodyguard, not an assistant. Him. He knelt. He lifted her into his arms. And for the first time in years, someone pressed their head against his chest without asking for anything in return. Her name was Kehlani. He didn't know that yet. What he knew was this: she was freezing. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. And as her fingers curled faintly around his jacket, something unfamiliar cracked inside him. He didn't understand it fully, but he knew. This wasn't a moment he could ignore. Two strangers, one world-famous address, a moment that would be written about in headlines and remembered far beyond the gates. If stories about second chances and unexpected kindness move something in you, hit subscribe now. This one won't just surprise you, it might just stay with you. Kehlani didn't wake up in a hospital. She didn't wake up in a shelter or on the street she'd nearly died on. She woke up in a room larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. Soft sheets covered her skin. Heat radiated from a nearby fireplace. And across the room, seated in a leather chair with his hands clasped in quiet tension, was the man who'd carried her through his front gate, as if she weighed nothing at all. She blinked, not from comfort, but confusion. Her instincts told her to bolt, but her body couldn't move yet, neither could her fear. "I didn't mean to trespass," she murmured, her voice hoarse, barely a whisper. "I was just trying to keep walking." Alejandro said nothing at first. He simply looked at her, not with pity, not with judgment, with something softer. "I'm glad you stopped," he said. Those 4 words weren't poetic, but they meant everything, because no one had been glad for her presence in a very long time. She didn't know who he was yet. She didn't know what kind of house this was, what kind of man he might be, or what it might cost to accept a stranger's help. But what she did know was this: for the first time in months, she was warm, and no one was yelling, no one was taking, just a quiet room, and a man who stayed. What if one decision could alter 2 lives forever? He didn't know why he'd stepped outside that night. He couldn't explain what pulled him out of routine and into something real. She couldn't explain why his voice made her eyes sting. But something had begun, and it would change them both. This isn't just a story about wealth or rescue. It's about something deeper, something rarely spoken out loud. What happens when 2 people, both broken in different ways, become each other's beginning again? Words spread quickly. At first, it was whispers online, rumors about a woman seen entering the Varick estate. Some said she was a distant relative, others speculated she was an old flame returning from nowhere, but the cameras didn't lie. When photos leaked, the question sharpened. Who was she? Why was she there? And what kind of man brings a stranger off the street into a fortress of privacy? Alejandro had never given the public access to his personal life. He avoided interviews. He didn't attend high-profile events unless absolutely necessary. He lived behind walls, both literal and emotional, but not anymore. Kehlani wasn't just a guest. She was a mystery the public couldn't stop trying to solve, and a decision the world refused to understand. Is he losing his edge? Is she using him? Has Varick finally snapped? Behind closed doors, it was much simpler. He found her unconscious. He made a choice. Weeks later, when she sat at his piano for the first time, fingers hesitant, breath held, soul flickering, he stood outside the room, just listening. He hadn't known music could make him feel again. She hadn't known anyone would care enough to hear her play. They were still strangers, in many ways, but something invisible had formed between them. Not an obligation, not a transaction, a connection neither of them expected, and both were terrified to trust. But this story isn't just about 2 unlikely souls crossing paths. Because just when it seemed like they'd found something worth protecting, the world tried to tear it apart. Scandals erupted. Boards threatened to remove Elandro from his own company. Kailani offered to walk away, to vanish again, like she had so many times before. He could have let her go. Instead, he stood before the world, faced the cameras, and made a decision that would stop the country in its tracks. Would you give everything to protect someone who gave you nothing, except a reason to feel again? If this story has already pulled at something inside you, do one kind thing today. Click subscribe and share this video with someone who still believes in people. We're just getting started. The ache in her stomach had dulled into something deeper, heavier than hunger. Her steps slowed with every breath. Cold air cut through the holes in her jeans, biting at her skin. Her shoes were soaked through, laces frayed, soles worn thin. She didn't care about any of that anymore. She just needed to keep walking, one foot forward, then the next. But the night was cruel. The city didn't sleep. It ignored. People passed her by, eyes locked on screens, hands buried in coat pockets. If anyone glanced her way, they looked through her, not at her. She pressed her hand to a nearby fence for balance, trying not to fold. Her vision blurred. Everything tilted. Somewhere in the distance, lights glowed behind tall stone walls. Not the yellow flicker of street lamps, but warm, steady lights, comfort, stillness. Her throat was dry, tongue thick. She couldn't even remember the last time she spoke to someone. Not truly. The gates ahead were wide and black, their iron bars taller than any she'd seen. The estate behind them looked unreal. A garden stretched across the front like a private world, manicured to perfection. Inside, windows glowed with steady golden light. Safe. She paused at the edge of the estate, breathing through her nose, fighting off the dizziness. Her hand trembled as she reached for the stone pillar. She wasn't thinking about who lived there, only that it was the last place before her legs gave out. And they did, silently, completely. Her knees buckled, and her body crumpled sideways. Her head hit the pavement softly. The world tilted once, then went still. No one screamed. No one ran. The only sound was the low hum of an engine somewhere blocks away, and her shallow, ragged breath slipping out into the cold. The room around him was all sharp lines and quiet luxury, polished wood floors, low burning fire, the faint tick of a distant clock. He lived in precision, in curated calm. That night was no different, until his eyes drifted to the corner monitor above his desk. At first, he barely registered the movement. Just a flicker, a shape near the entrance. He reached for the remote and enlarged the frame. That's when he saw her, lying still, half-curled at the base of the stone gate. Hair tangled, clothes clinging, no umbrella, no coat. Her body barely moved. Elandro set the glass down without a sound. He moved quickly, not with panic, just with purpose. Past the hallway, through the foyer, down the path toward the front entrance where most guests never entered. He keyed in a code, pressed his hand to the panel, and stepped into the night. From the cameras, she looked small, but standing over her now, she looked even smaller. The softest sound left her lips, not a word, not even a plea, just a faint breath as her head rolled slightly to the side. Her skin was cold to the touch. He didn't pause. He didn't call for someone else. He knelt, slid one arm beneath her legs, the other behind her shoulders, and lifted. She weighed almost nothing. Her head fell gently against his chest, a strand of wet hair brushing his collar. His grip tightened. The gate clicked shut behind him as he carried her up the path. The front doors opened before he reached them. A servant had spotted him on the cameras, but froze when they saw what he carried. "Call Dr. Morrow," Elandro ordered, voice low but sharp. No hesitation. The servant nodded, vanishing down the hall with quick steps. Elandro walked straight through the marble foyer, past the long staircases and heavy portraits, into the guest wing where the rooms were kept warm year-round. His pace never faltered. He could feel her shallow breaths against his shirt, each one weaker than the last. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and entered a room lit softly by wall sconces. He laid her carefully on the bed, adjusting her head against the pillows. Her lips were pale, skin chilled as if warmth itself had abandoned her. For the first time in years, something pulled his voice into gentleness. "You're safe," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. Minutes later, footsteps hurried down the hall. A man in his 50s entered carrying a case. Dr. Morrow had served the Varick household for decades, though seldom was he called for emergencies. "What happened?" the doctor asked, setting his tools on a table. "Collapse at my gate," Elandra replied, his tone flat but firm. "Check her first. Explanations later." The doctor nodded and began his work, stethoscope pressed to her chest, fingers at her pulse. A light shone briefly across her eyes. He asked for water, glucose tablets, towels. Staff moved quickly, slipping in and out like shadows. Elandra stood back, arms crossed, every muscle drawn tight. He had been in meetings where billions shifted with a single signature. He had faced storms of reporters and competitors. None of it had unsettled him like this. A stranger lying on his bed, fighting quietly to hold on. "She's severely dehydrated," Dr. Morrow finally said. "Likely malnourished. She'll need fluids, food, and rest. But she'll recover." Elandra gave a short nod. "Do whatever is necessary." Hours blurred into a hush of careful movements. Her breathing steadied under the doctor's care, color returning faintly to her cheeks. Eventually, she drifted into a deep sleep, her chest rising in slow, even rhythm. The doctor packed his things, glanced once more at Elandra, and said, "She'll be weak when she wakes, but she's past the worst of it." "Thank you," Elandra replied, walking him out. The house returned to silence, but Elandra didn't leave. He returned to the chair in the corner of the room, loosening his tie, resting his hands on his knees. He watched the rise and fall of her breathing, steady now, steady enough to calm the part of him that hadn't stopped tightening since he first saw her on the ground. Who was she? Why was she alone? Questions circled but didn't matter yet. Not tonight. He leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on her face, softened now by sleep. He told himself he was only there to be sure she was stable. That was all. But the truth was simpler. He didn't want to leave her side. When the first light of morning touched the edges of the curtains, she stirred. Her lashes flickered, a faint groan slipping from her lips. She shifted slightly beneath the sheets, brow furrowed as if waking in an unfamiliar world. Elandra sat forward, his voice even, quiet. "You're safe. Don't rush." Her eyes opened fully then, wide, hazel flecked with green. They darted across the room, taking in the carved walls, the fire in the grate, the stranger sitting only feet away. Panic sparked. "Where?" Her voice cracked. She swallowed, tried again. "Where am I?" Her lips parted, confusion sharpening. She looked at him, then the door, then back. Her hands gripped the blanket as though ready to flee. "You're not trapped," he said, sensing her fear. "You're a guest." She searched his face, her eyes restless, distrust flickering like an old habit. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping me?" For a moment he said nothing. His gaze softened, and when he finally spoke, the words were slower, stripped of performance. "Maybe because I know what it's like, to be alone." Silence hung between them, the kind of silence that speaks louder than noise. Something in her posture shifted, only slightly. The blanket still shielded her chest, her shoulders still curled inward, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer, as if testing whether she could believe him. For the first time in years, a spark of trust flickered inside her. Kailani tried to sit up. The effort sent a wave of weakness through her body, her arms trembling before she sank back into the pillows. "You need rest," Elandra said, his tone firm but not harsh. Her chest rose sharply, her breath uneven. "I don't belong here." He leaned forward slightly. "At the gate, you nearly stopped breathing. You belong where you're safe." Her eyes filled, not with gratitude, but with the raw ache of pride. For too long she had survived by expecting nothing from anyone. Accepting help felt heavier than hunger. "You don't even know me," she whispered. He studied her. "That doesn't matter tonight." A knock at the door broke the silence. A housekeeper entered with a tray, broth, bread, and water. Kailani's gaze fixed on the food, though she kept her arms tight across her stomach as if she didn't dare reach. Elandra noticed. He rose, carried the tray to her bedside, and set it down within reach. "Eat when you're ready," he said. She hesitated. Hunger gnawed at her, but shame pinned her in place. Slowly she extended a hand. The spoon shook as she lifted it, but when the warm broth touched her lips, her eyes fluttered shut. A sound escaped her throat, half relief, half disbelief. He didn't comment. He simply returned to the chair, giving her the dignity of silence. Minutes passed in quiet. The fire popped softly in the hearth. Shadows shifted against the walls. When the bowl was empty, she set the spoon down and pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. Her voice was faint. "Do you help people like this often?" "No." The simplicity of the answer startled her. She'd expected a lecture, some explanation. Instead, just one word. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the flames. "I don't let people in. Not usually." Her gaze drifted over the room. The books, the polished furniture, the careful order. A house that looked lived in, yet untouched by warmth. "Why me?" she asked again, softer this time. Alejandro's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice had lowered, more to himself than to her. "Because when I saw you, something told me to move. I didn't think. I just did." She swallowed, her throat tight. No one had spoken about her as if she mattered in years. Still, her walls didn't fall easily. She clutched the blanket and said, "If I stay, people will think things. About you, about me." He met her eyes at last. "Let them." The words sank into her, sharp and impossible. No one had ever dismissed the world's judgment so cleanly before. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came. She lay back against the pillow, exhausted from the weight of everything she'd carried for too long. Alejandro rose, adjusting the blanket around her. His hand brushed her wrist for a moment, steady, careful. "You're not alone tonight," he said. Long after she drifted into sleep again, he remained in the chair, his expression unreadable. Something had shifted. He didn't know what it was yet. He only knew that when he saw her at his gate, unconscious and fading, something inside him cracked open, something he thought he'd buried beneath years of walls, wealth, and silence. And as her breathing steadied once more, Alejandro realized with quiet certainty, this was not the end of an interruption. It was the beginning of something neither of them could step away from. The fire still burned when Kailani opened her eyes again. At first she thought it was a dream. The mattress beneath her was soft, the sheets tucked around her heavier than anything she had felt in years. The faint scent of lavender drifted through the air, mixing with the warmth of the flames across the room. Her body ached everywhere. Her lips were dry, her throat rough. For a long moment, she lay still, unsure if she even dared to move. Then her eyes adjusted. A high ceiling arched above her. The curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the world. To her right sat a tray on a small table, half a loaf of bread, a glass of water, a bowl covered with a silver lid. And across from her in the corner, a man sat in an armchair. Her breath caught. She bolted upright too quickly, her head spinning, hands clinging to the blanket. Fear lit in her eyes. Alejandro didn't flinch. He raised his head slowly, his posture calm, hands resting loosely on his knees. "You're safe," he said. His voice was smooth, steady, no sharp edges, no demands. But the words didn't soothe her. Panic coursed through her veins, sharper than hunger, sharper than pain. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse, unsteady. "In my home," he answered. "You collapsed outside last night. The doctor's been here. You're stable now." Her gaze darted toward the door, toward the fireplace, back to him. Her pulse thudded against her throat. "Why?" she whispered. "You needed help," he said simply. "You're not a prisoner," he added, reading her fear. His tone softened further. "You can leave when you're strong enough, but tonight you need rest." Kailani shook her head faintly, more to herself than to him. The kindness unsettled her. In her world, kindness always came with a price. She pulled her knees closer, shrinking beneath the blanket. "You don't know me." His eyes steadied on hers. "Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone has nothing left to give." The words hung in the air. Kailani's lips parted, but no reply came. Her chest tightened, her defenses battling the ache in her body. She looked down at her hands, calloused, raw from cold nights. She hated that he saw her like this, stripped of the little dignity she had left. Her whisper finally broke the silence. "Why didn't you just call someone else?" Alejandro leaned back in his chair. His gaze shifted briefly to the fire before returning to her. Because it was me who saw you, not anyone else. The answer disarmed her. Simple, without calculation. For the first time since waking, her shoulders loosened slightly beneath the blanket. A knock came at the door. A housekeeper entered quietly, carrying another tray, this one steaming with fresh soup. The woman placed it on the bedside table and left without a word. Kailani stared at the bowl, her stomach twisting with hunger. But shame weighed heavy. She didn't reach for it. Elandro rose, walked to the table, and uncovered the bowl. Steam rose into the air, carrying the scent of herbs and broth. He set it on her lap with quiet care, then stepped back. "You need strength," he said. Her fingers trembled around the spoon. The first sip burned her throat slightly, but warmth spread through her chest. A soft sound left her, half relief, half disbelief. He didn't comment. He only returned to his chair, letting her eat in peace. "I didn't ask for this. You didn't have to," he replied. The gentleness unsettled her again. It wasn't pity. It wasn't performance. Just calm truth. Her eyes lifted, meeting his. For the first time since waking, she didn't look away. And in that fleeting moment, something shifted inside her. Small, fragile, but undeniable. A spark of trust. The soup had settled in her stomach, but Kailani still clutched the blanket like armor. Her eyes flicked toward the fireplace again. The sound of the flames gave the room a rhythm, soft, crackling, constant. It grounded her in a way she hadn't expected. Elandro remained in his chair, watching without staring, speaking only when necessary. Just presence. That unsettled her more than if he demanded answers. She broke the silence first. "Do people just show up here like that?" "No," he replied. "Then why didn't you send me away?" Elandro leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "Because you were lying in the cold, half-conscious. Your lips were blue." He paused. "And because I could see what it cost you just to take another step." Kailani's chest tightened. She looked down again, fingers curling into the blanket. Being seen like that was almost worse than being ignored. "I've had worse," she muttered, as if trying to bury the embarrassment. "I believe you," he said quietly. Those 3 words hit differently. Not condescending, not sympathetic, just sincere. She swallowed. Her throat felt dry again. Her voice came slower now, words heavy. "I used to think things would get better, that I just had to hang on long enough. A bitter breath. But that was a long time ago." Elandro didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty hope or polite optimism. He simply listened. Something about that loosened her tongue. "I didn't mean to end up at your gate," she said. "I wasn't looking for a way out. I was just walking, until I couldn't anymore." He nodded once. "You don't owe me a reason," he replied. That stunned her more than anything so far. Everyone always wanted a reason, a label, a story they could handle. But this man didn't seem to. "Most people don't think like that," she said. "I'm not most people." Kailani let out a sound that might have been a laugh, soft, dry, fleeting. "You say that like it's a good thing. Depends on the day." That one made her smile. Barely, but it was real. She sat a little straighter now, still bundled up, still fragile, but her tone was less guarded. "Do you always sit in silence when strangers wake up in your house?" Elandro tilted his head slightly, as if considering it. "I don't usually have strangers in my house." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither said anything, but something passed between them, an understanding. Both had lived too long behind walls. Hers were built from survival, his from grief. A long pause, and then Kailani's voice broke the stillness again. "What do people think of you?" He didn't flinch. "Depends who's asking." She stared. "I mean, you're obviously someone important." He gave the smallest shrug. To the world," she added, half in awe, half in confusion. "You live in a place like this. People must say things. They always do." His tone stayed even. But there was something beneath it. Fatigue, maybe. Not from lack of sleep, but from being misunderstood for too long. Kailani nodded slowly. She understood that kind of exhaustion. "Do you care what they say?" "No," a pause. "Do you?" "I used to. When I had something to lose." The room felt quiet again, but not heavy this time. More like, still. Elandro spoke gently, as if thinking aloud. "I think people underestimate what it means to be honest, especially when you've been hurt." She looked up. "I'm not sure people want honesty," she said. He met her eyes. Maybe not all people, but the right ones do. A beat passed. If anyone watching this knows what it's like to be judged before you even speak, I hope you'll share something. Even a sentence. Even if it's just to say you felt invisible, too. Kehlani held his gaze. That's the kind of thing people remember. Have you ever trusted someone when you had every reason not to? Let us know in the comments. We read every story shared. Alondro stood then. Get some more rest, he said, stepping toward the door. There's a spare room across the hall if you need more privacy tomorrow, but this one is yours for as long as you need it. He paused before leaving. There's food whenever you're hungry. You don't have to ask. Then he walked out, leaving the door slightly open behind him. Kehlani lay back against the pillows, still not sure why this man had opened his door, still not sure if she believed him, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like running. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains like a quiet visitor. Kehlani stirred gently, her body still sore, but lighter than it had felt in weeks. She sat up, letting her feet brush the rug below the bed. It was soft, clean. She stood, slow and careful, her knees shaky beneath her. The air in the room was warmer than she expected. Everything was silent, but not in an eerie way. More like the house itself had been taught to speak gently. She walked to the table, took a sip of water, and then opened the door. The hallway was long, lined with art that looked too valuable to exist in a private home. But what struck her most wasn't the wealth. It was the stillness. The entire estate felt like a museum someone had forgotten to unlock. She stepped out, barefoot, listening. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, only the soft hum of the central heat and a distant chime of a clock somewhere deeper inside. She didn't mean to explore, but her feet carried her down the corridor and into an open parlor room. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with books. Real ones, no decorative filler. Worn spines, bent corners, a few pages marked with ribbon. A grand piano sat near the window. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen one up close in years. She walked toward it slowly, like approaching something sacred. Her fingertips hovered above the keys but didn't touch. Not yet. On a nearby table sat a half-finished chess game. 2 cups of tea, one full, one long empty. A newspaper folded neatly in half, but it was what wasn't there that stood out. No photographs, no personal trinkets, no clutter. It was a house full of things, but missing the usual marks of a life being lived. She turned at the sound of a quiet voice behind her. Most people go to the kitchen first. Kehlani spun around. Alondro stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled, no jacket this time. She didn't apologize. I wasn't trying to snoop. He raised a brow. Didn't say you were. They looked at each other. Something about the moment made her feel oddly grounded. This room doesn't feel like the others, she said. It's the only one I use regularly. She gestured toward the chessboard. Do you play against yourself? Sometimes. Depends how much I need the silence. She nodded, understanding more than he knew. Then she looked back at the piano. Do you play? There was a long pause. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. You're free to stay, Alondro said. There's no timeline. She looked at him carefully. Why are you really doing this? She asked. I don't need a place that makes me feel like a guest. I need somewhere that doesn't make me feel invisible. He stepped closer, just a few feet away now. I'm not offering charity, he said. I'm offering space, and you're not invisible here. The words settled in her chest, heavy but comforting. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like someone passing through. The room she now slept in had become familiar, not home, not yet, but familiar. Kehlani no longer jumped at the sound of footsteps down the hall. She didn't sleep with her shoes on. She didn't scan the room for exits before closing her eyes. But the quiet still made her nervous sometimes, the kind of nervous that doesn't come from fear. It comes from unfamiliar peace. She stood by the tall window, arms folded across her chest, watching early autumn leaves drift to the stone driveway below. Somewhere in the distance, a gardener trimmed the hedges. The world here moved without chaos, too still, like it didn't belong to her. Her mind wandered often, to before, to things she didn't talk about, not because she couldn't, but because it cost too much. She remembered standing in her parents' kitchen barefoot, balancing a cup of water on her head for posture while her mother laughed. She remembered the way her father adjusted the bench before every piano lesson, never too high, never too low. She remembered music not as sound, but as warmth, a space she could escape into, even when things started falling apart. She hadn't touched a piano since before the funeral. She hadn't dared. Not after what followed, being taken in by her mother's sister, who treated her more like an obligation than family. Promises were made. Money was mismanaged. Eventually, she stopped asking about her inheritance. She knew the answer without hearing it. The final music scholarship audition came and went. She didn't show up. After that, her days blurred. Job to job, couch to couch, shelter to shelter. And then, that gate, a knock brought her back. "Come in," she said, her voice faint. Elandro entered, holding 2 mugs of tea. He handed her one wordlessly and sat across from her in the upholstered chair near the bookshelf. She took the cup, surprised at the temperature. Perfect. Like everything else here. They sat in silence for a while. It wasn't uncomfortable, just quiet. "You don't sleep much," she finally said. "Habit," he replied. She looked at him closely. Today he wore a simple gray sweater, sleeves rolled, no watch. He looked less like a man running 1,000 things, and more like someone waiting to say something but unsure how. "Do you work from home?" "I built it that way, yes." He didn't elaborate. She tilted her head slightly. "Why so private?" He met her eyes. "You don't like being watched." "Neither do I." It wasn't the kind of line that invited pity. It was a truth. Clear, measured, and unexpectedly familiar. She nodded slowly. "You hide it well. I've had practice." "So have I." Their eyes held for a moment too long. Then she stood, walking toward the bookcase. Her fingers brushed across the spines. "Your books are real," she said. He gave a small smile. "Shouldn't they be?" "I've been in houses where the shelves were full, but the stories were hollow." He didn't argue, just sipped his tea. She turned toward the piano. "I used to play," she said, barely louder than a whisper. He didn't respond. He didn't push. He only looked at her like someone who heard more in what she didn't say than what she did. She placed her cup on the edge of the instrument, her eyes scanning the keys, still untouched. Her fingers hovered. They twitched, then withdrew. "Not yet." "You miss it?" he asked quietly. Kehlani sat on the bench slowly. Her back remained stiff, posture unsure. He tilted his head. "Says who?" She hesitated. "No one. But it's easier not to." Elandro stood then. He walked to the door, pausing only once. "If you ever play again, I'll hear it." Then he left. Kehlani sat there for a while after, hands folded in her lap. Not ready, but not running either. The house was quiet again. Kehlani walked the hall barefoot, mug in hand, heartbeat slower than usual. She hadn't slept deeply the night before. Memory stirred too much, but her body was getting stronger. Her steps no longer faltered. She found herself back in the room with the piano. No one was around, no voices, no footsteps, just the soft morning light streaking through the windows, cutting gentle lines across the keys. She stared at them for a long time. Her reflection showed faintly in the polished wood, hollow cheeks, tangled curls pulled into a knot, eyes that carried too many miles. She sat, her hands hovered again. But this time, she didn't pull back. She let her fingers touch the keys just barely. The surface was smooth, cool. She pressed one note. Soft, hollow. It lingered in the air longer than she expected. Then a third, and then her hands moved without her permission, finding shapes, remembering patterns, moving in phrases that lived in her muscles even after her mind forgot. She wasn't playing for anyone, not for an audition, not for praise, not even for healing. She was simply remembering what it felt like to create something beautiful in a world that had taken so much. Across the hallway, Elandro stood by the door, still, silent. He hadn't meant to listen. He had just been passing, tea in hand, heading toward the garden. But the moment he heard the first few notes, hesitant but unmistakable, he stopped. The melody shifted. She moved into something softer, half lullaby, half memory. She wasn't broken now. She wasn't struggling. She was powerful. Elandro had once walked through rooms filled with priceless music. He'd hosted events where world-renowned performers graced grand halls. He'd sat in front rows, clapped politely, nodded along to the greats. None of it felt like this. This felt human, raw, quiet, alive. He leaned against the wall, head lowered, eyes shut, as if her music filled something in him he hadn't realized was empty. Back in the room, Kailani played slower now, notes bleeding into one another like the end of a sentence she didn't want to say out loud. Then she stopped. No dramatic finish, no flourish, just silence. Her hands fell gently into her lap. She sat there, heart full, eyes stinging, breath shallow. The bench didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a return. She didn't know someone had heard, but if she had, she might not have minded. Sometimes the thing that saves us isn't someone's advice or money or rescue. It's the space to remember who we were before the world demanded we become something else. If you've ever reconnected with a part of yourself you thought was gone, tap like right now. And if music or art ever gave you back a piece of your soul, share it in the comments. Your story might help someone who hasn't found their way back yet. Kailani stood up slowly. She didn't touch the keys again. Not today. She simply left the room with shoulders lighter, steps steadier. Across the hall, Alondra watched her pass without speaking. She didn't see him. He stayed in place a moment longer, then turned and walked the other way. That evening, Kailani sat in the courtyard alone. The temperature had cooled. The stone beneath her bare feet held a trace of warmth from the sun, now hidden behind the trees. She'd wrapped herself in a soft shawl from the guest room closet, one she suspected had been left out on purpose. In front of her, a candle flickered on the small table. To her right, a plate of untouched bread. She wasn't hungry. She was thinking about the piano, about how it felt to play again, and how she didn't regret it. Alondra approached quietly. He stopped a few steps away. "Mind company?" he asked. She looked up. "No." He sat across from her, placing a cup of tea on the table between them. She noticed he always brought tea, not out of habit, but maybe as a way to offer something without asking too much. "You played beautifully," he said. She blinked. "You heard?" He gave a small nod. "Didn't mean to. Didn't leave." Kailani let out a faint exhale, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. "I didn't know I still had it in me." "You never lost it," he said. "You just stopped giving yourself permission." She stared at him, caught off guard by the clarity of the statement. Silence again. Then, "I used to think music would be my way out." "Out of what?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Everything." He didn't speak, letting her words settle. "My parents died when I was 16. Car accident. After that, I lived with an aunt who saw me as a bank account, not family. The money disappeared. So did the opportunities. You stopped playing. I stopped dreaming." She didn't cry. Her voice didn't break. But the pain was in her stillness, in the way her fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. Alondra nodded slowly. "Some losses leave you breathing but empty." Kailani looked up. "You speak from experience?" "Yes." She didn't ask what he'd lost. She knew the answer wasn't a single person or moment. It was likely spread across years, unspoken and stitched into him. He sipped his tea. "My parents divorced when I was 5. My mother remarried someone who thought children were noise. I learned to be quiet, useful, excellent." A pause. "Success came early. It never felt like mine. Everything I built looked impressive from the outside, but it never touched the part of me that needed something real. And now?" "Now," he said, "I still have the buildings, the staff, the company. But the last time someone said my name like it meant something, I was a boy." Kailani didn't respond for a long time. Then, "You don't talk like most men I've met." He looked at her. "You don't hide like most women I've met." Another pause. Another soft moment that didn't need to be filled. "Why did you keep the piano?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I told myself it added elegance to the room, but maybe part of me was waiting for someone to sit at it." Kailani smiled faintly. It was waiting for someone to play it. The wind shifted slightly, leaves rustled, the candle flickered. She looked at him, her voice barely audible. "Do you think people like us get to heal?" His answer was quiet but certain. "I think we do when we stop pretending we don't need to." The words landed inside her like a weight and a comfort at once. She didn't speak again. But she didn't get up either. They sat there until the candle went out. The night was clear, quiet. Kailani stepped into the garden barefoot, drawn by the soft glow from the lamps tucked beneath the hedges. The grass was cool, the stone path warm. A breeze brushed against her skin, carrying the scent of earth and jasmine. She didn't come out here to find him. But there he was, sitting beneath the small canopy by the far end of the garden, cup in hand, looking up at the sky. She almost turned back. Then he looked over his shoulder. "I come out here to think," he said. "Or not think." She hesitated. "I don't want to interrupt. You're not." She walked toward him slowly, carefully. Every step made her aware of how long it had been since she chose to be close to someone, without needing something. When she reached the bench, she didn't ask to sit. She just did. They sat shoulder to shoulder in silence, looking at the stars. "Why do you always drink tea?" she asked softly. He smiled. "I like habits that don't control me." She nodded. "Most of mine aren't so harmless." He didn't ask for examples. She was grateful. The silence returned, but this time it held warmth. Kailani tilted her head back to look up. "It's strange," she said. "I've seen the stars my whole life, but they never felt safe. Why now?" "Because I'm not afraid of what's behind me right now." She didn't look at him when she said it, and he didn't speak right away. But when he did, his voice was lower, warmer. "Neither am I." A leaf rustled. A soft wind moved past them. He looked at her then. "Do you miss anyone?" She blinked. "All the time." "Who first?" "My father." He nodded. "Mine too." Kailani turned toward him, her voice quieter now. "You've given me more space than anyone ever has." "I wasn't trying to give you space," he said. "I was trying not to scare you." She stared at him. "You didn't." Their eyes held, not because of some scripted romance, but because there was nothing else to do but look. Her voice barely broke the quiet. "I thought I forgot how to want this," he answered without moving. "You didn't." She reached out, slow, hesitant, and touched his hand. He turned his palm upward, meeting hers gently. It wasn't the moment for fireworks or declarations. It was the moment for stillness. He moved first, just a little, enough to bridge the space between them. She met him halfway. Their lips touched, light, searching, careful. Not because they were unsure, but because they cared. They didn't speak afterward. They didn't need to. They stayed side by side, hands still touching, hearts not racing, just present. That was new. He tilted his face slightly toward her hair. Not a claim, not an invitation, just closeness. They stayed that way until the lights in the house faded, until the garden belonged only to them. They stayed beneath the stars until the breeze grew cooler and the silence grew heavier, not in weight, but in meaning. Elandra looked down at her. "Come inside," he said, voice low. Kailani didn't answer. She just stood. He followed. They walked through the house without speaking, not because there was nothing to say, but because what passed between them no longer needed words. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't lead her by the hand. Still, they walked the same path, upstairs, toward the west wing. He opened the door to a quiet room, not lavish, not staged, a reading chair, a small lamp, a window overlooking the garden. He didn't close the door behind them. Neither did she. Kailani moved toward the edge of the bed and sat. Her breathing was steady, but there was something fragile in her stillness, not fear, but memory. She looked up at him. "I haven't been close to anyone in a long time." Elandra stepped forward but didn't touch her. "I'm not in a hurry." She nodded. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand again, the same way she had in the garden, fingers first, then palm to palm. Then she let go, only to reach higher, resting her hand gently at his chest. He stepped closer. Their foreheads touched. So did he. They lay side by side that night, fully clothed, wrapped in quiet and layered breath. His arm circled her back. Her hand rested at his collarbone. Kailani spoke first. "My aunt once told me love was just dead in disguise. Then, that's because she only knew love as leverage. I don't want anything from you." "You already gave me something," he said. "What?" "You made me feel known, without asking for anything in return." She blinked slowly. That's how you made me feel the first night, when I woke up. Later, under dim lamplight and slow hands, they moved closer. The quiet between them thickened, not from hesitation, but from care. His hand grazed her cheek. Her breath caught. She leaned into him gently. They kissed again, the kind that makes time lose shape. They didn't rush. They explored slowly, skin against fabric, lips against skin, fingers threading through hair. Each moment an answer to a question neither of them had spoken out loud. When her head rested against his chest again, it wasn't out of exhaustion. It was surrender, not to him, but to something she had feared wasn't real anymore. They fell asleep like that, entwined, not claimed, not consumed. Light spilled into the room in soft gold. Kehlani blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the warmth filtering through the curtains. Her head rested against Alondra's chest. His arm remained loosely around her back, his breathing steady beneath her cheek. She didn't move, not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time in years, waking up didn't feel like a battle. When she finally stirred, he opened his eyes. He looked at her. No smile, no performance. Just a softness she hadn't seen in him before. "Good morning," she said. "Better than most," he replied. She sat up, pulling the covers with her, suddenly aware of the space between reality and memory. He followed her movement, slowly rising to sit beside her. For a moment, they said nothing. Then she looked at him, her voice quieter now. "You're not going to ask me what this means?" "No." "You're not going to make it complicated?" "No." She gave a breathy laugh. "I've had a lot of people attach strings to moments like this. I don't use strings," he answered without hesitation. Presence. Her throat tightened. Not because of fear, but because she wasn't used to safety being this quiet. "Elandro," she said softly. "Thank you for not treating me like I'm broken." "You're not broken," he replied. "You've just been carrying too much weight with no one beside you." That undid something in her, not in a dramatic way, just in a way that made her exhale, long and slow, like she'd been holding her breath for years. They got dressed without ceremony. She wore one of the robes left in the closet. He threw on a sweater and slacks. No rush, no awkwardness. In the kitchen, they moved around each other easily. He poured coffee. She toasted bread. At one point, their hands brushed while reaching for the same jar of honey. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. Better than okay. They took their breakfast to the back veranda, where the garden stretched out beyond the glass doors. Morning dew still clung to the petals of the hedges. Birds moved lazily between branches. Alondro sipped his coffee. Kehlani sat cross-legged in the chair beside him, eyes closed, face turned toward the sun. "That's because, for once, it's not." After a pause, she added, "Last night didn't fix everything." He nodded. "It wasn't supposed to. But it felt like the first time in a long time I wasn't trying to survive something while it was happening." That sentence hung in the air, heavy, true. He didn't try to soften it. He simply reached over and rested his hand on hers, quiet and steady. Time passed gently. Later that day, she found herself in the piano room again. This time she played with confidence, not for him, not for anyone, just because she could. Elandro stood at the far end of the hall, out of sight, a hand resting lightly on the doorframe. He didn't interrupt, didn't comment. He smiled faintly, didn't want to steal the moment. "You didn't." She stood, walked toward him. They didn't kiss. They didn't say anything dramatic. But when they passed each other in the doorway, their shoulders brushed, and neither of them moved away. They were changing, together. It started with a single headline. No names, just speculation. Who was the woman living in Alondro Varick's estate? By the time Kehlani stepped onto the porch that morning, the media chaos had already arrived. Drones buzzed in the distance. Parked vans with dark-tinted windows sat just beyond the hedges. Long-lens cameras pointed like rifles from behind shrubs. She froze. Alondro appeared beside her, quiet as always, holding a fresh cup of coffee. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows. "Don't go too far," he murmured, calm but firm. "They figured it out." Kehlani's eyes locked onto the blinking lights from a camera down the street. Her heart dropped. "How?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "They always do." It hadn't taken long. A blurred image taken from the corner of a tablet screen. A second-hand photo snapped by a delivery worker. The internet took those scraps and created a wildfire. Mystery woman collapses outside billionaire's gate. Now she's living inside. From homeless to heartthrob, the woman stealing Varric time, and maybe his heart. A rich man's stray, who is she really? Kaylani's face was suddenly everywhere. Every blog speculated. Social media dissected her body language. Strangers analyzed her clothes, voice, posture. They called her manipulative. They called her lucky. Some called her worse. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't prepared for it. She never even had a chance to speak. Inside, the mansion buzzed in its own way. Phone lines lit up. Alejandro's board scheduled an emergency video call. His lead investor requested an urgent transparency briefing. An old college friend messaged, "You finally lost it." He didn't respond. He didn't care. But Kaylani did. She stood near the piano, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her back was to the door. "I never wanted this," she whispered as he walked in. "I didn't even want to be seen." Alejandro didn't answer right away. She turned to him slowly. "They think I'm a liar." He walked to her. "Let them. They think I faked it. That I manipulated you. Do you believe that?" She looked at him through glassy eyes. "No." Her voice cracked. "You could lose everything." He reached for her hand. "If I lose you, I already have." She pulled away, shaking. "I can't be the reason your empire crumbles. I can't stay if it means you fall." "I'm not falling," he said. "They've always called me powerful, and I've never cared less than I do now." Kaylani turned, pacing. "I don't belong here. I never did." "You do," he said without hesitation. "More than anyone ever has. I need air. You're free to take it." She stepped out into the back garden alone, walked past the fountain, and sat on the edge of the stone path. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the folded tabloid article she'd pulled from the breakfast table. The homeless girl who stole a billionaire's heart, or just his reputation. Her eyes blurred over the words. She didn't cry. She just sat there, and for the first time since stepping foot in that house, she felt like maybe she should have died on that pavement after all. Inside, Alejandro stood in his study. He held his phone in one hand. He stared at a blank message screen, typed a few lines, deleted them, again. He wasn't going to write a statement. He wasn't going to explain. He was going to act. If you've ever had the world judge you before knowing your heart, hit the like button. If you've ever stood by someone no matter the noise, share this story. And if you believe some things are worth standing up for, even in the storm, subscribe right now, because we're not done yet. The silence between them stretched into hours. Kaylani stayed in the garden long after the sun began to drop. Her fingers were numb from the breeze, her thoughts heavier than her coat. In her lap, the tabloid printout wrinkled from her grip. She had read the headline so many times it felt burned into her skin. The stray in the castle, she didn't know which part, stung worse, the lie or the fact that millions believed it. He didn't speak, just sat beside her quietly. They didn't look at each other at first. The world had already said too much. Finally, she spoke. "They're not wrong." He didn't answer. "I walked into your life from the sidewalk. A ghost. Now they call me a distraction, a stain." He reached down, picked up the paper in her lap, and tore it in half without looking at it. "Then maybe it's time they see what love looks like," he said calmly. She turned toward him, exhausted. "This isn't about love. It's about what they're taking from you." He looked at her, direct, grounded. "No, it's about what I refuse to let them take." The boardroom waited for him the next morning. A dozen advisors on screen, each more polished than the last. Alejandro showed up late. No apology. His camera was off. When he finally spoke, it was short. "I've never been controlled by headlines, and I won't start now." A voice replied, "But this isn't just gossip, sir. It's perception, public trust, market value. Then let them sell their shares," he said. "We'll see who regrets it first." Meanwhile, Kaylani packed her bag upstairs. She folded her few clothes, the donated ones, the soft ones Alejandro had given her. She set them in gently like memories she didn't want to disturb. Then she paused. Her hands shook. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't hear him enter. "Leaving without saying goodbye?" Alejandro's voice was quiet. She wiped her face quickly. "I was going to leave a note." He stepped closer. "You know I wouldn't read it." She stood. "I can't be the reason you fight your own world. You're not the reason I'm fighting. You're the reason I'm finally awake." She turned away. "This isn't fair to you. It's not fair to you either, he said. But you've stayed anyway. There was a pause. He walked closer. He reached out, placing a hand gently over hers. You walked into my life with nothing. No plans, no angle, just heart. Kailani looked down. He continued, You didn't take anything from me. You gave me back what I didn't know I'd lost. She broke then. Not loudly, but completely. He pulled her into his arms. No cameras, no spotlights, just the truth. I'm not letting you go, he whispered. You'll have to fight me for that. The next morning, Kailani woke to a different kind of silence. No garden birds, no subtle footsteps in the hallway. The air felt suspended, like something was coming. She wrapped herself in her shawl and stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, the staff moved with quiet urgency. A suit bag was being zipped shut. A briefcase clicked closed. Elandro stood in the foyer, adjusting his cufflinks with calm precision. Kailani froze at the top of the stairs. Where are you going? He looked up at her. To end the noise, the press conference had been arranged in under 4 hours. Every major outlet sent a camera crew. Anchors rehearsed their lines outside the gated estate. Helicopters hovered overhead for aerial shots of the mansion. Elandro stood behind the podium alone. No legal team, no PR consultant, just him. The world watched. He spoke without notes, no rehearsed speech, no statement cleared by lawyers. I just want to say something as a man, not a figure. He paused. When I found her, she was unconscious outside my gate. No name, no coat, no expectation. His voice didn't waver. I didn't save her, she saved me, from my own isolation, from the emptiness success doesn't cure. He continued. She is not a project. She's not a scandal. She is not a mistake. He looked directly into the lenses. She is the only honest thing that's ever walked into my life uninvited, and I thank the heavens every day that she did. The reporters shouted questions, some snide, some sympathetic. Elandro raised a hand. One more thing. He turned slightly, and from behind the curtains, Kailani stepped forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elandro reached into his pocket, and there, on the steps of a global spotlight, he knelt, not as a businessman, not as a tycoon, but as a man, in love with the woman who reminded him what it meant to live. I don't care what they say. I only care what you feel. He opened the box. A simple band. No diamonds, no theatrics, just a symbol. Will you marry me? But they didn't hear it. They only heard each other. And for a moment, a beautiful, real moment, the world went quiet. The podium stood still beneath the weight of anticipation. Elandro's estate had never been this loud. Cameras lined the walkway. Satellite vans packed the block. Microphones tilted toward the center like petals leaning into light. But at the center of it all, Elandro stood still. He didn't wear the smile his boardroom admired. He didn't offer the wave the media craved. He simply looked ahead, tall, collected, and silent. Then he leaned forward and spoke into the mic. I wasn't planning to do this. Flashes erupted, but life doesn't always care about plans. There was no script in his hand, no screen behind him. When she came into my life, it wasn't through an introduction or a gala or some orchestrated meeting. It was gravity, a force that didn't ask permission. He paused. She collapsed outside my gate. He held eye contact with the crowd. While I was sipping wine in a chair made by a designer, she was unconscious in the cold, fighting for her next breath. Murmurs ran through the crowd. A reporter cleared his throat. Cameras still trained on the stage. She didn't knock. She didn't ask for help. She didn't expect to be saved. He looked down, fingers resting lightly on the podium's edge. But I saw her. And in that moment, I think I saw myself for the first time in years. Social feeds lit up. Live chat windows exploded. Streaming numbers tripled. Inside the estate, Kailani watched from the quiet of the upstairs balcony. Every word struck her chest like a pulse. She doesn't know I'm saying this, Elandro continued. She didn't ask for any of this attention, but she's been torn apart by it. He gestured toward the cameras. And I let it happen. I thought I could protect her by staying silent, by sheltering us. I was wrong. He stepped out from behind the podium. His voice never lost its steadiness, but something in his eyes softened. The steel was still there, but now wrapped in warmth. I don't want to be admired anymore. I want to be understood. The reporters shouted questions, but he lifted a hand. Let me finish. The crowd quieted again. When I brought her into my home, I thought I was helping someone, giving shelter, giving kindness, giving back. He smiled slightly. I had it backwards. A pause. She gave me more than I've ever given anyone. She gave me a reason to stop pretending. The murmurs returned, louder this time. Some reporters whispered into their earpieces, describing what they thought was unfolding. Others froze, unsure if they were watching a man unravel or rise. Ilandro ignored them all. He scanned the sea of faces, then looked to the edge of the stage. And then, softly, he raised his hand and gestured. The side curtain stirred. Kehlani stepped into view. She looked like the calm in the middle of a storm. Not polished like the magazines expected, not styled for a headline, just her, centered, graceful, and unafraid. The dress she wore moved with her quietly, and her eyes locked on Ilandro the second she saw him. Not the cameras, not the stage, just him. The crowd gasped. Some phones dropped in astonishment. Someone whispered, "Is this really happening?" Ilandro met her halfway. Every step he took was deliberate. He didn't rush. He didn't flinch. When he reached her, he didn't say anything at first. He simply reached for her hand. She gave it to him without hesitation, and in the hush that settled over the audience, he knelt down slowly. "No speeches now," he said gently. She blinked, stunned. "I just need to ask you something as the man you met, not the one they keep writing about." He took a small ring box from his pocket. Unassuming, he opened it. And without theatrics, he said, "Will you marry me?" Kehlani's breath caught in her throat. Tears didn't fall, but her lips parted, trembling. "Yes," she whispered. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't forced. It was real. She pulled him up and wrapped her arms around him. No hiding now, no shame, no fear. And for a few seconds, even the world, noisy and relentless, stood still. The drive home was silent. Not the kind of silence that came from tension, but the kind that followed something so powerful, neither of them needed to fill it. Kehlani sat with her hand in his. No flashing lights, no stage, just the hum of the car and the steady rhythm of breathing between two people who'd just altered the course of their lives in front of millions. Back at the estate, the staff had gathered quietly, lining the corridor as they returned, just knowing smiles and quiet nods. Ilandro didn't make his speech. He didn't need to. He walked her upstairs, hands still wrapped in hers. He opened the door to her room, their room now, the one with the fireplace, still warm, and the scent of lavender still clinging to the sheets. The weight of everything began to settle. He nodded once. She took a step closer. "They'll still talk?" He stepped even closer. "Let them." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I didn't do it for them." She rested her forehead against his chest. "And I didn't say yes because of the cameras," she whispered. "I know," he replied. "That's why I asked." Later that night, the world would explode with headlines. Billionaire shocks press with live proposal. She said yes, a modern fairy tale. But inside the mansion, no one read the headlines. No one scrolled or tweeted or reshared. Inside, they sat by the fire, wrapped in each other. No need for anything loud. Because what they'd chosen, fully and publicly, was louder than any flashbulb or trending topic. If you felt even a flicker of emotion during this moment, if their courage, their truth, or their quiet love moved you in any way, please, like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us that love still matters. And don't forget to comment below. There were no glass chandeliers, no camera crews, no velvet ropes. Their wedding took place in the garden where Kehlani once told him that quiet could feel lonely. Now, that same quiet felt like a warm hand resting over their hearts. A few close friends, a few staff members who had become something more than employees. No extravagance, just sincerity. Ilandro stood beneath the ivy-covered archway, wearing a soft gray suit. Kehlani walked toward him barefoot, her dress brushing the grass, her curls tumbling down her back the way they used to when she still played the piano every morning for no one. No crowd, no noise, just vows spoken between two people who had already survived their hardest storms. "I never believed in soulmates," he said, taking her hands. "Neither did I," she whispered. "But you were never a belief, you were a fact. They exchanged rings. Nothing extravagant, just bands carved with quiet words. Hers read, "You saw me." His read, "You saved me." That night there were no fireworks, just music, not from a stereo but from her fingers, playing again beneath the moonlight in the room he once left untouched for years. And he listened the way he always had, from the shadows, with reverence, like her music stitched something whole in him that nothing else ever could. 2 months later, Kailani stood in front of a building that hadn't existed before. It wasn't a shelter, it was a sanctuary, a space designed with her story in mind. Not just a bed or a meal, but a place to recover dignity, to rebuild life. The Kailani Grace Foundation for Women opened its doors quietly. No ribbon-cutting ceremony, just handshakes, warm tea, and a team trained to treat every woman who entered not as a problem to be solved, but a life to be held. Alondro never loved the spotlight, but when it came to Kailani's story, her truth, her strength, he didn't hesitate to use his name for good. Across 3 cities, then 10, then 20, music academies began to appear. Not flashy conservatories, not elite schools behind golden gates. These were open doors, instruments for children who had never touched one. Rooms with windows where music was more than art. It was medicine. Each academy bore the same plaque, in honor of Kailani, who played through the silence. On weekends she visited them. No announcements, no interviews. Just a woman sitting beside a student, helping them find a melody with fingers that once trembled like her own. At home, they kept their life gentle. They cooked together, argued over spices, read books aloud in bed, took long walks without phones. She glanced at the mirror above it and saw herself. Not the girl who had collapsed outside. Not the woman fighting to prove she was worth saving. Just herself, whole, steady, loved. Alondro came behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She leaned back into him. "I'm thinking, this is peace." He kissed her shoulder softly. "And it was worth everything, if you stayed with us through this journey. If Kailani's strength and Alondro's choice touched something in you, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What does love mean to you when no one else is watching? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you in any way. Help us spread stories that remind the world compassion is still powerful. There are stories that entertain, and then there are stories that shift something deep within us. This was never just about a wealthy man and a girl on the edge of collapse. It was about what happens when one person chooses kindness over convenience. When someone sees what the world overlooks. When love begins, not with grand gestures, but with gentle presence. Compassion changes lives. It was never Alondro's wealth that saved Kailani. It was the moment he walked through his front door, stepped into the night and picked her up, not as a problem to solve, but as a human being who mattered. Compassion isn't charity, it's not pity, it's recognizing someone's pain and choosing to sit beside it even when you don't understand it. It's what carried her inside, it's what kept her there, and in the end, it's what saved him too. Love isn't about status. He had the world, but none of it touched him the way her presence did. No title, no estate, no fame, just a girl who played piano like it was prayer. Just a woman who reminded him what it meant to be seen, really seen. Their love wasn't built in moments that could be broadcast. It was built in quiet evenings, shared tea, unspoken glances, and healing without words. That's what made it unshakable. Real intimacy requires trust. They didn't fall in love overnight. There were fears, there were walls. But trust was the foundation, brick by careful brick. Kailani didn't need saving. She needed space to breathe, a place to feel safe. And when Alondro offered her that without expectation, she gave him something in return that no amount of wealth could buy, her story, her full self. That's intimacy. Not loud, not rushed, but rooted in trust, nurtured over time. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the kind of love this world desperately needs, please, like this video. Oh, share your thoughts in the comments. What does compassion mean to you? Subscribe to Mr. Ross Story Trail for more powerful narratives that inspire, challenge, and uplift. Every share helps this story reach someone who might need it right now. Let's remind the world together. Kindness still matters. Love still heals. And every person deserves to be seen.